Hello, everyone. This is Nick from Businessmap, formerly Combinize, as we like to say. And now we've decided to start these new series where we interview thought leaders on leadership, project management, and work management as a whole. As our very first guest, I'm glad to have Jon Kern, who is a co-author of the Agile Manifesto and a lead consultant at the Adaptavist group. And today we were talking about team collaboration, building high performing teams. And for me, what will be very interesting to hear from Jon, what is his opinion on the state of Agile right now? So, hi, Jon, how are you?
Hi, Nick. Doing great. Living the dream as usual. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so maybe just can you give our audience a bit of an introduction of yourself? Like, what have you been up to these days? What do you do at the Adaptavist group? And yeah, what is Adaptavist in general?
Oh, sure. Yes. So they're known for being probably the biggest and best partner with Atlassian. So it might seem a little bit odd, but I have some good friends that a few years ago said they would like. I talked to the Simon, our wonderful CEO, and said, "Hey, we'd like to do some stuff in the agile space." So I'm kind of a consultant. We try to help teams and organizations. Like my part anyway is trying to help folks do joyous and meaningful work and become, as you mentioned, the high performing teams and try to uh, break down the impediments to becoming a place where agility flourishes. And it's not easy, that's for sure. But I've been doing it for a while. It's kind of the first part of my career was as an aeronautical engineer. So I have a engineering background, did a lot of research development, flight simulation started getting me
Mm.
into the world of software and things like that. So um, yeah, I've had a wonderfully varied career creating various companies along the way, and this is another one of my stages of especially in the agile space. I've come to realize we need to keep pushing, even though it's been almost, it's coming up on 25 years.
Yeah,
There's still a lot of, I think, misconceptions and missteps going on. So yeah, that's me.
right. So maybe we should start from like a little bit of a backstory. What do you remember from just the Agile Manifesto back in the day when you guys, got together and created that? It's been a long time, since then. So, what do you think has changed in the Agile space, and do you think people's perception about Agile is what you initially thought back then?
Well, that's a great question. The what might be lost on a lot of the youngsters today only know agile, so they don't know. Um, I did Department of Defense contracting as well, which really led me to create, we would now call it an agile methodology, but a lightweight methodology, basically to kind of combat a heavyweight approach that was being foisted, forced upon us. And back in the day, probably the biggest market leader was, rational unified process, which looks mysteriously a lot like SAFe today. It's kind of like what's going on? Why are we back to big heavyweight process? Although I remember saying, well, you're allowed to tailor the approach. I could tailor RUP to make it look like my lightweight process. But so in essence, one of the reasons we got together was there were a handful of us practicing different methodologies, just didn't have the marketing muscle, didn't have the eyeballs, so to speak. So part of it was to see what's common amongst us lightweight methodologists. Luckily, we came up with another term called agile. But yeah, so back in the day, that was the um, standard approach, waterfall, heavyweight process. And so, what I recall about the event, the cool thing is nobody has the pure recollection because it was just a handful of folks getting together to ski and drink, eat,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
occasionally talk about software stuff. So it wasn't as if we knew this was an important event that we'd still be talking about. So, it's the beauty is nobody has a lock on the truth about what went on. We all have different, memories. But I often state that in the beginning we were describing our methodologies, getting to know each other. I'd never heard of Scrum.
Mhm.
XP, of course, was famous. So, there was like 4 folks from XP that, at least I knew about it, had bought the book, that kind of
Mm.
thing.
Yeah.
DSDM, I never heard of. So there are a lot of stuff that was just new to, I'm sure, many of us. I was reflecting like feature driven development. So we got to know each other, and I felt like we left our egos at the door, is a phrase that I often use. So that allowed us to kind of get at the gist of what things were common amongst us, and that's what we ended up being able to produce those four initial values in that um, in that time period. And the amazing thing about that, Alistair reminded me, I was with Alistair in Munich early June, and he reminded me that we literally wordsmith, and I'm kind of a nut about wordsmithing. We made sure every word was acceptable, and
Mm.
that we got thumbs up from all 17 of us. So that's a pretty momentous thing to get. I doubt that we could get the 17. Well, now it's 16. Rest in peace, Mike Beadle. I doubt that we could get us to agree on anything now. Like that at that level, detail. We might, but in other words, it was a um, pretty amazing result that I like to sort of joke that we at the last minute decided, yeah, why not put it on the internet? you know,
Yeah.
back then the internet was new. It's like
Yeah.
wasn't big as it is today. So it's like, yeah, you know, I like to joke that Ward Cunningham said, hey, you want me to put this up on the web? That this new thing called the web? Yeah, sure, yeah, why not? Go ahead. It probably didn't really happen that way, but you know, yeah.
No, but it was a good decision at the end of the day because a lot of people started referencing to it, like
Yep.
so. Uh, but right now, you talk about. I've seen you talk about reimagining agile across different mediums, and I was just wondering what does that mean to you, and why do you think that we need to reimagine agile, and pretty much what's the state of agile right now? Because a lot of our experience when we talk to people looking to transform their work management and their processes, when they hear about agile, they become a little bit defensive. So what's your opinion on that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting arc of sort of the agile um ethos. I don't even know what to call it, but the spirit of agile. Certainly in the beginning, it was like we unleashed freedom on millions of people. You could just feel it. That wow, it really hit I would call it a resonant frequency, and um, that this is just my really rough thoughts on what happened, so to speak, and why we're here. Because partway through, there suddenly was this uptick of, you know, I think a lot of companies realizing how important software was, and it had become, much more critical to their business. There was a rush of folks into the space because there was, good wages and things like that. The whole Scrum thing with 2-day certifications. Maybe it was a way for, I remember at the time used to think that was a path for business analysts or somehow to become Scrum masters. And um, and as I would see, like, I'm sorry, but it's like takes a lifetime to become, a master of a, it's not like apprentice, in machining or plumbing or electricians, right? There truly is a process to get to become a master tool maker, or, and to me, this was a bit of a slap in the face of an actual career with real, I mean, you have to have logbooks, so I started looking as, this negatively on that whole process. I'm not certified, at least not
Mm.
in that. I might be certifiable, as the joke goes. But so I actually sort of somewhere maybe in the middle, I kind of checked out of the Agile movement, like, all right, y'all are on your own now. Good luck. Because this is just BS.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, nothing wrong. I mean, really good Scrum Masters are awesome, and they do a lot more than what you learn in 2 days. So, but it was, and it's the race to the certification sort of obscures those who are actually treating it, as a profession and really learning how to deliver value and things like that. So I think what happened is the rush happened. We filled a perceived void with maybe, a bunch of folks, and now those companies are starting to realize they don't need that anymore. Who knows? But there's been a shedding of some of the maybe overemployment of of certain types of workers, so to speak. So I think of it as kind of a right sizing of getting back to maybe what's a more normal shape for what
Mm.
teams need to look like to solve problems. So I think the what dawned on me with the Reimagining Agile was, um, I felt like in not the US or not Western Europe, but in other, whether like Eastern European countries or South America or India, places a little out of the, the folks who had been doing it longer, it felt like they were less jaded. They were more excited, more like the conferences are more awesome at times, and it seemed more invigorated. It seemed a little bit like the old days. And
Mm.
I'm going to credit this. I call them the Polish Agile community. Had contacted me a couple years ago to help them with a redo of translation of the manifesto. There already was one. There is one, in many different languages people translated, but somehow they felt
Yep.
the need to have another run at it. I think there are some areas maybe they disagreed with the translation. So that became a fascinating couple of conversations where I kind of joke they spent more time on the manifesto collectively than we authors did, I think. Um, but I realized not only are there a lot of youngsters, young people who only know Agile, who might not understand the background of where it was born from. They pointed out there are some. I think one of the principles about being, the funny worded one about realizing, what's kind of doing the least amount possible, like not
Okay. Yeah.
whatever that. You can see how much I memorized the manifesto. um, they said that our language doesn't even support, after I explained what that meant, they said, yeah, our language doesn't support that. We can't say it that way or something like that. I just remember thinking to myself, I might mix this up a little bit, but, I never thought about that in different, because English is a pretty, I don't know, opportunistic language. It's like we'll steal
Mm.
words and things from all of, many different, so it's not, it's not very uniform.
Mm.
And so just realizing that there could even be errors in translation, even in people's heads, about the manifesto was a bit of a, oh, wow. not only have these folks only grown up, quote, under Agile in some sense. Some folks in the like I said, not US and maybe not UK and some Western Europe, and not non-English speaking, not potentially not truly being able to easily understand all parts of it. So I thought that plus the bashing, like in LinkedIn, you would see, or in some.
Yep.
I remember I sort of, tried to smack down. There was one dumb article on the register.com about, stupid things, saying just dumb things about Agile. And then every time people say these dumb things about Agile, I look at what they're complaining about and I'm like, well, none of that's Agile. So, like it's just this. So I kind of felt there's a lot of misconceptions. I want to, provide a way to maybe, oh, and I'll say, sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself. Another friend of mine, Daniel Markham, told, this is also in this similar time frame. I was probably about it. And John says, well, think about it. I mean, Daniel says, John, think about it. Folks who are new, maybe coming out of university or something like that, come into the world. What are they supposed to do with the manifesto?
Mm.
What do you do with that? I said, oh, wow. Good point. I guess you read it, but yeah, what do you do? There's no start here. There's no user's guide. There's no, no process. There's nothing, it's the kind of thing that I realize if you get it, you probably don't need it. And,
Yeah.
And if you don't understand it, how do you get there? So, these things all kind of combined, that led me to, in the Agile Alliance meeting in Orlando in 2023 was when I thought, oh, cool, there'll be a few of us there. So I knew James Grenning was going to be there. This guy Daniel was supposed to be there, but he had to back out. I remember contacting Jim Highsmith, so Adaptavist, paid for him to come there. Tim Ottinger was going to be there, a handful of people in the space. So it's kind of like an Adaptavist turned it into something a little more formal, a roundtable. So that was really the beginning, but I wanted to begin the discussions of how do we help. I feel like this is, I'm going to give it one more shot to help people be able to identify the charlatans and the fake Agile and the, so that, that kind of birthed the Reimagining Agile. And part of that was after we spoke about reimagining Agile, and somebody had already taken, I quickly went to get the URL, the domain, and somebody already took like Reimagine Agile. It's like, oh, and it was literally right after we talked about it. I was like, all right, that was, yeah, couldn't have been a coincidence. So then I pounced on Reimagining Agile. So that's kind of the actual,
Right.
The technical reason why it became that was because someone else took the other domain. So, but the idea is to provide a place where we can help the next generation or the current generation think of sort of better ways to extend the concepts of Agile beyond just software and to kind of reinvigorate Agile within the software. Because my personal angle behind this is I'm interviewing with some colleagues what I call exemplars. So anybody out there who's got a story to tell, contact me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Where agility is flourishing, a place where you're living the values and the principles. Because I think there's a lot of folks out there quietly being successful, quietly being agile, not making a big fanfare. And I'd like to elevate those stories. And I'm doing it for two reasons. One, to help people combat the agile bashing,
Mm.
That's, fake agile. Help combat that, to help recognize, here's what good looks like. Oh, and that's, then they might recognize themselves in that context. Oh, cool. So there's a chance that we can, experience this. And then through interviews, dig out some nuggets of wisdom, and what I call them like nuggets of gold, that could form a pattern library of sorts, of moves, things you could do to help feather the nest in your organization, to build a high performing,
Mm.
high agility team. So that's the goal. Is I have a hypothesis that we can go talk to folks around the world who are doing it well, try to dig out things that, not a new framework, not a new Agile Manifesto, none of that. Just, here's some tips and tricks and moves. We call them moves, like chess moves. Here's some moves you might be able to do. Here's some patterns that we've spotted in these stories. So it's sort of a dual purpose, beacons of hope, and a little researchy. Here's some things you can try and experiment with in your company, and then maybe report back, build a community around this, and reimagine
Right.
agile.com. Yeah. So
Right.
Adaptavist is helping build out a website, reimaginingagile.com. So, but that's
Right.
long
Yeah.
answer.
That's a great approach, I think, because it's, taking something that works in practice, and a lot of the things related to agile are, they work but on theory, and a lot of times the practical approach is completely different. So, when talking about agility, because you mentioned it, I always think of like agility in organizations. I always think of decentralizing control across teams, so the organization can achieve through adaptability. However, there is also a big concern that this can lead to chaos. So, I was wondering, what are some common team collaboration challenges that you faced, and in your experience, how do you tackle that concern, that decentralizing control can lead to chaos?
Yeah, well, that you hit on probably one of the toughest aspects, um, of agile, and I want to say in situ, in place, because oftentimes there's competing forces. There might be, you often hear of, well, yeah, the team's able to get it all going on, but then they bump into a layer above, and that's true. I mean, that's actually one of the biggest problems. Is um, I God bless those who do training. I always say, no, I don't do training, because you can't train agile.
Yeah.
You can't read a book. I mean, books are
Yeah.
good. Books
Yeah.
are helpful. I mean, I like books. I read a lot of books, but it's like, you can't just read a book and know how to play tennis. No, you have to get, so I often for decades call it mentoring, or if I had to use a sports analogy, it'd be like an American football quarterback. Like, you're actually on the field of play, or you can get smacked in the mouth by reality. You're not on the sidelines. You're not just coaching. Again, coaching has its purposes, so is training. I might do a little training in TDD and BDD, just to get on a simple problem, get things rolling and learn about it. But then very quickly, you have to go into the real world. Otherwise, it's, trainer leaves and you're kind of left wondering, how do I apply this? So for me, Agile has to be experienced. And I was just talking with Alexandra Stokes last night in Australia, because she's got some exemplars. She's got a lot of experience helping transform. I read some cool things in her book, Empowering Agile Transformations, and it resonated a lot with me. And the whole thing about, she points out, a lot of the leaders, the C-suite, that layer above the teams, they might not know the first thing about Agile.
Mm.
Like, the odds are pretty high. They might have come from a successful other organization, and suddenly they're, above these teams, and they've never experienced Agile truly. And, so kind of to your point about how do you build those high performing teams? How do you deal with that sort of disconnect with, is it chaos? Well, it should not be. The
Mm,
whole the real challenge is that the leadership needs to understand the perspective of certainly what's going on, and they've got valid perspectives as well. So I think the the real key is constantly helping reinforce the direction of travel. So I have a very opinionated way of how to build teams, how to deliver successful products, and it's requires high levels of collaboration, high levels of repetition of what it is we're trying to achieve, and it's recursive from a company to a product to a major feature set down to an issue. It's frankly, it's all the same. It's just different levels, so to speak.
right. Yeah.
But the biggest things that we combat in this world, I think, are the misperceptions and the misconceptions of what really needs to happen to allow teams to be highly effective, highly agile. And if you don't have leadership that understands how it works, then they're oftentimes back in the command and control, just need more planning. They only can sort of seemingly deal with, and this is the same with people in the teams too. If you can only deal with simple ideas or maybe complicated, but not complex, and complex are unknowable, and people often get scared of the unknowable, and you need to grow that superpower. So a lot of what's required for high performing teams is to build a way for teams to grow in their ways of making meaning, to be able to deal, because it's a sad, good news, bad news. We have a lot of experts in our field, and experts are very narrow-minded typically, versus someone who can see multiple perspectives and who can deal with, it's okay to be fuzzy. We'll take pieces out that we can make concrete and then put those through our system. So building leaders and team members who have a more of a growth mindset is so critical to that. You cannot have a high performing team if you've got a kind of a locked in layer at the top who might be on top of silos and they're just trying to defend their turf. But the symptom of this, if this resonates for the listeners out there, a typical symptom that I see of not high performing is folks doing far too much work in too great of a depth of detail, far too in advance of the need. And that's a clear sign to me that you've probably got compartmentalized. You probably have, well, we always have to have a UX design step. Really? And what do you do for 8 hours if you're a UX designer? Well, I make designs, kind of whether you need them or not. I've seen literally stupid. Sometimes I exaggerate for effect. I'm really not this harsh, but it's like, oh my gosh, I saw like the stupidest Jira issue. I make fun of it, like it's as if, can you please add middle name to the account profile page, edit form. And there was like a UX design for that. I'm like, really? Like, I think I'd fire that. If I didn't have, I could come in there and be able to do that work, not even knowing your tech stack, right? Come on. Like, but it's that sort of compartmentalized, treating it like it's a machine, not being able to think, just doing your assignment. I see people do roles and all this. Cross-functional team doesn't mean you have to have somebody in each sort of area of skill that you need. No, you need, as a collective, you need to be able to do whatever it takes to build stuff. And I don't need to put like a cookie cutter template of a team together. Well, make sure everyone's got a key to, this many devs, this many QA, this many UX, and that's not how it works. You just need to have more capability, and then the leadership above needs to also stop sort of in reinforcing those silos. And I think that's the big problem. is we lock people in to this false way. I mean, it works. You can still get stuff out the door, but it's very inefficient, super costly, not effective, probably not fun. And that's why I say, from a holistic point of view, you have to have the vision of where we're going, whether it's a product or that feature, and let the smart brains that we hire do the smallest thing possible. And that's hard. But if they're just taking orders, you're going to waste money. But if they're able to exercise judgment, and what I try to do is inculcate, be lazy, do the least amount possible, and then if you have to do some UX design, do the smallest bit possible and test it, instead of don't spend 8 hours doing it. Try to do it for 2 hours and then read a book the other 6. I don't care. And
Yeah.
anything other than waste time doing too much work.
Right.
And you can't exercise judgment if you don't know how to measure something. If I do more, does it get better? I don't know. It's just what I do. So
Yeah.
that's what I think is the hardest, is breaking down that mindset. And that's, hard to do without a little mentoring, and without somebody setting a timer and say, stop, just deliver
Mm.
what you got and see if it works. So anyway, that's kind of my take.
Yeah, that's actually a great perspective. Yeah, and so you mentioned obviously something that you see that a not high performing team does, right? So what would you say are some characteristics then of high performing teams?
Yes. So one of the exemplars that we're doing has a fascinating story. Actually, two. One with a super high performing team, and one that's kind of a little, still challenged. And there's a few characteristics, and one of them is the layer of management above actually understands the big picture, and
Mm.
they will help each other um, to maybe not get, not sacrifice your own part of the world. Like, they really have a much clearer, holistic, shared understanding of each other's perspectives, and they work together, and that permeates down through the teams, that they know, like, the only thing that counts is the big picture, not our individual. So someone might help. Oh, no, don't worry about, don't forget about your, your operational whatever. It's like, someone might just help another one avoid, because we all slip when when we're working. Sometimes we slip and fall back into a, maybe not the best way of doing something. So that was very obvious. The other team for that he talked about, they still weren't gelled. They still were more individual leaders and not really working together. And
Mm.
then a real amazing aspect of this particular business was, I call it radical empathy for the user, the client, the customer. They literally would bring, because these were real people with real problems that this company was helping, and they would bring stories into, like, all hands meetings every, I don't know how often, every week, every month, something pretty often, to bring it home. And it's that constant drumbeat of what's our vision and our mission. It's constant repetition. And I often say Agile is the hardest thing to do because it takes constant partial attention. It's easy to slip. Uh,
Yeah.
it's easy to fall back. So that kind of reminder of, these are real people. We make differences in people's lives. And so that also permeated the whole organization. The development teams know that the value they're providing. And I often talk about, in order to, like, I'll usually say I can outsmall anybody in terms of delivering the smallest thing and testing it, because that's a super important skill, because it can often lead you to deliver super value dense, high impact for less effort, and get rid of the frivolous stuff, that, because most of what we think we need to deliver is just a guess. It's a hypothesis.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that goes back to doing too much work too far in advance, right? People do too much. So it's a reminder when you have the real user there that the faster you can test and get some value out there, the better. So all this, it's a very holistic approach. Again, it's not this command and control. It's, it lets people realize how much they can impact their end user. And then they did a crazy thing where there was a third-party vendor they were working with to deliver another product. So it's kind of like they would hand off, tee up, so to speak, a perfect, ready to buy customer, because at this journey in this particular customer, you could use this product. So here we partner with this customer. So I'm sure this resonates with a lot of listeners in terms of, a lot of times we do have vendors that we partner with. Well, that vendor did not share, shall we say, the same level of care for their customers. So these person, it suddenly started becoming apparent that they would insert one of their customers into the, let's say, the sales funnel of their partner, and it would get treated like all the other ones, which were less than likely to happen. And so they ended up sending, luckily it was maybe an hour's drive or less than an hour's drive from where the team lived. So they actually sent a few people to go in bed with these folks, find out what's going on. But that to me that's kind of like next level. It's like, wow, they not only saw the problem, they care deeply enough about the problem that they send their own people to go work with these other people to help share their culture, and then actually help them find out, it's like some sales things. Was it, whatever was going on, they were able to now work with the vendor and their perspective and help them see, the parent company's perspective. So that's a pretty amazing step of really living. I mean, my gosh, living the values and the principles.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Extending into someone else's company that touches my customer. Like, wow.
Yeah.
So, that I would say the just a more holistic perspectives that the leadership took permeates down to to the teams. The fact that the customer was never far from mind, literally. And as I said, they literally would bring them into the building and do like an all hands and video, and so that kind of culture has to be, an amazing place to want to work.
Yeah,
because you're making a difference. And so that's a good example.
But a lot of here it's great that you mentioned that, because a lot of customers, and just people that we talk to that embark on these transformative initiatives, they are worried about the leadership involvement, and they understand that they need to build this open, holistic culture, but are not very sure how the leadership is going to buy into this. So in your opinion, how do how should we involve leaders more, and just change their perspective that this is the way we should work, this is the way we should operate, and that builds high performing teams that deliver more work at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is to appeal to their business sense, and you just said it, at the end of the day, essentially, these techniques should help you deliver value more quickly for less effort. So, time to market should go up, or, down. Like, it should be faster. The time to market will improve. I'll just use improve.
Yeah.
Quality should improve if you build build in more of the test driven approaches and automation. And so you can appeal to let's say the dollar signs or the money side, because a lot of times it's the strongest argument to be made is there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of excess energy being spent, not a lot of value being produced quickly enough. Hey, why don't we try something new? And another way to appeal is to, while it might be, there's the balance of, well, do we just pick an easy thing? Well, you could, but then they still might deny success. Well, it was easy. So sometimes go big or go home, so to speak. Choose something that's been more of a challenge, so that they can't claim, well, it's like in football. Well, you've only beaten, not so good teams. All right, whatever.
Yeah.
But the other element is to weave into that process it's like you have to convince, I think, the leaders at the top to be willing to grow. Well, put it this way, if they're not willing to grow themselves, if they're not willing to demonstrate themselves, then maybe you should walk away, because it's on a gentle decline maybe. But if you find leadership and you can help convince them that they need to set the tone, they need to learn some of this newfangled stuff, they need to grow, and will you go on a journey with us and be present and help? So I think you can find those willing leaders and do sort of a pilot to show, and because that's my colleague Jon Turley at Adaptavist has really led a big learning in me about, there's this whole world of the way people make their meaning, and there's events, and then there's how we respond to them, and that's built largely on how do we make our meaning about that. So there's different capabilities in different people with how we respond, how we view things, how we are able to make decisions around those sorts of events. Like, how do we interpret what we just saw? And so that's, you can learn, you can grow. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to start with a willing leader that
Right.
recognizes it's worth spending some time on a journey to see that there could be a new way, a different way, a better way, and to help grow it from within. And yes, it's not chaos, it's more autonomy, but at the same time, with that constant drumbeat of what's the mission, what's the value, what's so the leaders can keep that flag in the distance alive, and they can help support the team in their autonomy, which is a lot less effort than micromanaging. And
Yeah.
we just need to plan more. No, we don't.
Yeah.
Still won't get any further. We'll just waste time. So it's basically appealing to their sense of wanting to grow, wanting to do better, wanting to deliver more for less effort, and becoming a beacon of hope within their own organization. So I think that's, start small, not big bang approach.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's great that you actually mentioned, having the vision and the goals really, open to anybody and like visualized. Because at Business Map, what we often talk about is systems thinking and like optimizing the whole, which is a lean principle, not
Mm-hmm.
focusing on just local optimizations. So what is your experience with that? Like, have you taught organizations on systems thinking, and do you think that's a valuable approach to approach a whole transformation from?
Yeah, I think because of the good fortune that I had of going into aeronautical engineering, you're forced into systems thinking, because I often say, if there's a funny visual that I've seen where you have an aircraft designed by different departments. You think of different silos, And
Yeah.
so the structural engineering, it's all these giant I-beams. The aerodynamicist, it's this little needle, that can fly super high, hypersonic. It's the propulsion group, it's all engines,
Yeah.
as a joke, because no, that's not how, airplane design is just super holistic. And, if you want more of something, you got to give less of something else. And so that, I think I was inculcated in that worldview and that mindset of there's no free lunch. You can't wiggle one part without affecting another. And so
Right.
that systems thinking, that holistic design pervades everything I do and coach or mentor and practice. So yeah, it's super important. And even road mapping, I think of it as um, often say you're just doing just enough. So I might have ideas about where we want to go, but I don't spend a lot of, the further something is away of being reality, it could just be one sentence. And the
Mm.
closer it is to being real, you better get to getting, because, if someone's about to start writing code for something, you better know more about it. And that's it's a combination of having that holistic systems thinking approach and being super pragmatic. Because for me, agile and lean, they're not the end. There are
Mm.
means to an end. There are, they help you be more pragmatic. They help you keep the main thing the main thing. They help you focus. And so, like for me, leadership is helping to build support for that. Things like business map or road mapping, and it helps keep things front and center. It's a way to express this is what we're thinking of and planning at the moment, but at the same time hold some of those as lightly as possible, because they may never come, right? They
Yeah.
just some future idea. So it's a it's a bit of art and science to
Absolutely. Yeah.
how to kind of will and motivate a group of people to accomplish something amazing and have fun doing it. Because if you're not
Yeah.
having, I mean, I'm not, it doesn't have to be a party every day, but also shouldn't suck to come to work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There
Yeah.
should be, times of this is awesome. We're having a good time. We're delivering value. It's real. I can see the impact. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, definitely, yeah, it did. And actually, I'm making a correlation to the beginning of our conversation here and about reimagining Agile, because I think a lot of organizations used to approach Agile just from, oh, we know about Scrum and let's apply Scrum here at this team and we should just magically start working faster and be better, right? And it's actually about mapping your entire business, right? Mapping your entire processes and looking where are my bottlenecks,
yep.
how do we optimize just the entire flow of whether that's an informational product or whatever product we're building. So yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, recognizing that, you're exactly right. We see that a lot. So at Adaptavist, my colleague Jon Turley and I, and then depending on the size of an engagement, we bring in other agile folks. But the core, one of the simplest things we do, it's literally a matter of 2 to 3 days, and often spread out, maybe 4 hours a day or something, a couple days a week. But we literally can quickly come in and help a team, help a value stream.
Mm.
Some group that actually works together, not some bunch of random people at the company, but a real group trying to get something done for real. The leadership is involved in the beginning, so we get their input. They might kick it off, but they're sort of okay. You can leave now, because we want the team to quickly build enough safety so there's no high powered people that so they can kind of let it all out what's really going on. And we're able to very quickly, through a kind of almost a cathartic process of having them first we sort of test, do you know your purpose, do you know that vision in the distance, and we'll
Yeah.
split into breakout rooms into teams, and they come back together. Some folks they align pretty well, and other folks are like, you can tell, I just come in, it's a job, right? It's like, uh-oh, they're not that well, and it's not that clear. So we have these sort of funny ways to get at some underlying issues. But the ultimate thing is, after the cathartic release of all the pain that they might currently being experienced, we do find those bottlenecks, those maybe places where there's an excessive amount of time being spent, or a lot of reverse flows, as I might call it, which is, okay, that's not good, especially if it's in production. Then it's a reverse flow. That's real bad. That's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the idea is you kind of get a good picture of what's going on. Again, it's in a short amount of time. We time box it, so we also demonstrate ways that teams can do this other times as well, and then we help lead them to a better approach. How should we combat what we just discovered? Like you said, some of our bottlenecks. What should we do? So they end up being able to pitch back to leadership a kind of a stack ranked list of, we map it on effort versus value. So there's a lot of times low hanging fruit. So they're able to say, hey, look, this is what we learned. This is where we're headed. We're going to improve these ways. Here's the steps we're going to take. And, we can help them, or, they might be just happy on their own. But the idea is that's how you get kind of and I will say we also can benchmark it ahead of time with some, we'll often be able to capture how autonomous do these folks feel. And we'll be able to do we work with Network Perspectives. They have some cool tools like a developer experience survey. So we can kind of benchmark where do they think they're at in terms of how awesome is it to work here. And that allows us to then re-benchmark after some time. Like, okay, we did this little exercise. You went and start to do some improvements. All right, maybe in 3 months we take another survey, or 6 months, or so we sort of have a bit of a accountability process to see, can we move the needle through this exercise. And sometimes it's as crazy as a 50% projected savings in a new way of working. Talk about appealing to the business. So what we like to say is we can quickly earn, let's say, some elbow room in the process to pay back our cost of coming in and helping you do this. And we actually measure it. So, that's a really powerful service offering. That's kind of a quick hit, to get at what an individual team is, and, kind of find out how holistic are you, so I'd love to help. The most fun is to help good teams become great. But a lot of times we're helping, low performing teams just to try to get to be good, which is a start. It's a journey.
Right. Yeah. Just to get them to the performing state, maybe not high performing yet, but to the performing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Great. And I don't want to take much of your time. So to finish our conversation, if you could list maybe top 3 tips to an organization or a leader about building high performing teams, what would they be?
Oh,
maybe there are more, but
I would say the things that are coming to mind is share the vision and the mission more frequently than you think you have to. And it's recursive, that applies to all layers. And try to do the smallest thing you can almost every step of the way, because you have sort of embraced that much of what we think we know, we do not, right? So treat things like a hypothesis, because they really are. And be willing to grow and learn that the things that got you to where you are may not be the things needed to get us to where we need to go.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that sums up, greatly our conversation, and um, especially the second point that you mentioned. Treat everything as an experiment. Really, like you said, it's uh, in reality everything we do is an experiment. So yeah, that's really valuable. Okay, John, so thank you for your participation and sharing your expertise with us. Maybe in the future we can have you like on a webinar with a real, live Q&A session where some of our, listeners can also join in, ask you questions.
Oh,
But
I would love to. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, I love,
wonderful.
those are some of my favorite things to do, is to meet with teams and,
Yeah,
just freely discuss things. I learn a lot by what they're facing. It helps me keep the pulse on a lot more teams than I can actually physically work with. So yeah,
yeah,
any Nick, I love it.
wonderful,
I like
wonderful.
your
Thank you.
style. So yeah, I'd love to.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And yes, we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good.